Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 146. Constellation Banquet. Part 1. Rain poured down on Gwangwaman Square. The streets were near ruins thanks to the monsters. The collapsed media logos were broken and trampled on. The King Sejong the Great and Isunshin statues that were the symbols of Gwangwaman were completely destroyed. The civilization that Seoul boasted had collapsed and the culture was lost. There was only one story left, but none of the people in Gwangwaman wanted this story. Lee Jae-hai opened her mouth as she watched some of the Warang digging at the ground. Is he really dead? Nobody answered her. The reasons for not responding were different. Young Hee-won, Lee Hyun-sung, Lee Gil-young, Shin Yu-sung. They had their own thoughts, but none of them spoke. Perhaps their thoughts were wrong. Perhaps they were afraid it was right. No. Really? Kim Dokja's body was discovered around an hour after the end of the 8th scenario. Juicy. Wake up. Is this a joke? The cause of death was excessive blood loss. At first, everyone was confused. Kim Dokja, who hadn't been seen throughout the entire situation, suddenly died. Still, the party members waited without much panic. This situation had happened a few times. The first time they hunted the fire dragon and when facing the disaster of floods. Kim Dokja always survived death. Thus, they waited this time. He would rise again as usual and give the party members his distinctive smile. He would tell some timid jokes. However, Kim Dokja didn't rise again. 1 hour passed and then 2. Finally, 1 day passed. It was the same when the second night arrived. Kim Dokja didn't resurrect. His body was cold. It was Min Jae-won who encouraged the members by making a coffin. He was the strongest in Seoul. She started doing what no one else could do. She knew Kim Dokja, but she could do it because her relationship with Kim Dokja was light. Min Jae-won spoke of Kim Dokja's sacrifice. She spread the story of the man who chose to die quietly while everyone was enthusiastically watching the battle between the strongest people. Everyone called Kim Dokja by different nicknames. In fact, when the Dakibi had named the strongest incarnation, people thought of different nicknames. King of a Kingless World. The Lonely Messiah. The Ugliest King. The words were different, but the direction they converged was all the same. The strongest person in Seoul Dong was Kim Dokja, and Kim Dokja died for Seoul. Seoul was saved by Kim Dokja. A savior died in a place that no one knew. Min Jae-won made a coffin for this Kim Dokja. People watched Kim Dokja's body being laid in the coffin and held back tears. Some people were confused by who he was, while some people sighed after belatedly hearing the story. Meanwhile, Shin Yu-sung was crying. Juicy. Yu-sung. Young Hee-won pulled Shin Yu-sung away from the coffin. Lee Hyun-sung still had a confused expression while Lee Gil-young's face was blank, as if he was fleeing reality. Dokja Hyung isn't dead. Finally, Lee Jae-hai screamed, "Where did Master go? Master can save Juicy. Where is Seolwa Uni?" However, Yoo Jong-hyuk wasn't here to hear the blame. Eventually, Lee Jae-hai also started crying. Juicy. They had to admit it, even if they didn't want to. Kim Dokja was dead and he wouldn't resurrect again. The new main scenario will start soon. They now had to live in a world without Kim Dokja. If it was ways of survival, then this sentence would have been written. Well, don't mourn for me. I wanted to shout, but my voice didn't come out. It was because I was in a state where my vocal cords weren't formed. It was comforting to be able to observe the situation as a third-party observer whenever my mental power was restored. It would be nice if I could use first person's viewpoint, but it wasn't working right now after being overloaded by Yoo Jong-hyuk. Excessive immersion has restricted the use of first-person viewpoint. The coffin was covered in dirt and some people shouted. The ugliest king. Shit. Did the Dakibis attach the nickname the ugliest king to me? It must be that bastard Baihyung. I felt stranger when I saw Shin Yu-sung crying and throwing flowers onto my grave. The party members were now convinced that I was dead. I watched as they attended my funeral. I was probably the only one like this. Hiya. Lee Gil-young was weeping and had a runny nose as he ran towards the coffin half covered in dirt. Lee Jae-hai was also the same. Ajasi Yai. She was normally a child who acted angrily towards me, so I was touched. It would be a funny scene if I woke up in the coffin right now. However, I couldn't do that. It was because I was currently in the so-called cooldown time. The privilege of 8 lives has been activated. The resurrection itself was nothing to worry about. I had the attribute 8 lives that I obtained from Peaceland after giving up King of No Killing. This attribute could be obtained only by drinking the soul and flesh of Yamada no Orochi, literally providing the person with 8 lives. The first head of the snake has been sacrificed. The power of this head is wary person. Different types of abilities slept in Yamada no Orochi's heads, and after resurrection, I could get a blessing related to the ability. This wasn't bad at all. The problem was that unlike King of No Killing, there was a waiting time with this privilege. 72 hours of waiting time are required before the resurrection. Time remaining, 2400 hours 07 and 12 seconds. I still had one more day to go, and it was time for the next scenario to start. I watched my funeral a bit more, before changing my point of view. I couldn't resurrect yet, so I felt sorry to watch it any longer. Changing the person observed with third-person viewpoint. Then a new screen popped up. It was a basement with antique finishes. A man and woman were there. Yu Jong-hyuk SSI? The woman was naturally Yu Sanga. Needless to say, it was Yu Jong-hyuk who released her from where she had been tied up. It was the last favor I asked before leaving his body. Yu Sanga asked, "What happened to Dokja SSI?" "Kim Dokja is dead." Yu Sanga looked like the world had collapsed at Yu Jong-hyuk's blunt declaration. I frowned slightly when I saw this expression. The 28-year-old Kim Dokja's life wasn't that bad. However, he will live again. Live again? How? I don't know. I just know he won't die like that. Well, Yu Jong-hyuk had seen me resurrecting in the past. He would surely believe that I would rise again eventually. No, he must live. Then why was he clenching his fist so much? Yu Jong-hyuk was silent for a moment before speaking to Yu Sanga, who was in shock. Where is Kim Dokja's family member? The remark surprised me. This bastard, why was he doing something I didn't ask him to do? Yu Sanga's face changed at the word family member. She seemed to have something urgent to say. His mother is. Unfortunately, at this moment, the screen was turned off and a message was heard. Your mental power is exhausted. Exclusive skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint Stage 3 has been turned off. This was the bad thing about a soul body. The recovery of exhausted mental power was slow. It was natural, since there wasn't a physical body. A soul without a body was like a battery that lost one electrode. The longer the period without a body, the more exhausted the mind became. It was the reason why ghosts went crazy. Did Nirvana kill my mother? I had to keep asking questions in order to keep from going crazy. It can't be. This was my mother, not someone else. Nirvana also wasn't a character who easily killed or tortured others. Nirvana was a gentleman when acting as the Salvation leader. However, there were the last words that Nirvana spoke. He said that my mother had a secret she kept from me. A secret that my mother was hiding from me? I couldn't get a grip of it at all, no matter how hard I thought. I didn't know. No, maybe I didn't want to know. Then an indirect message was heard. The constellation Master of Abydos is calling your soul. I hadn't heard any indirect messages for a while, so I was a bit confused. Master of Abydos? I pondered over the contents of Ways of Survival. If I remembered correctly, Abydos was the capital of ancient Egypt. The nebula Papyrus wants to offer you this story of resurrection. Oh, look at this! Papyrus was the nebula for Egyptian mythology. The constellation, Scribe of Heaven, is calling your soul. Eh? Metatron? As soon as I thought about it, the next message appeared. The nebula Eden wants to lead you down Messiah's path. The story of resurrection, Messiah. The constellation God of Wine and Ecstasy wants to take you away from the lower constellations. The nebula Olympus will set the stage for you. What was this? The constellation Master of December 25th is calling you. The nebula Vedas will present you with the holiday of resurrection. The constellation Flower Blossom of Siakian flower fields is calling your soul. The nebula Tamna wants you. From Indian mythology to Korean mythology? Many more indirect messages were pouring in. From huge nebulas to small nebulas, they all sent me love calls. I could tell what these constellations were thinking. They were trying to cover me with their myths. Some constellations are facing each other. Some constellations are giving warnings not to steal someone else's myths. Dionysus, Mitra, Halak Gungi. The constellations calling me were all involved in resurrection. The constellation are having a battle of nerves over your resurrection. In other words, these guys were trying to step into my narrative. All stories were enhanced through being circulated. The more that humans told the story and passed them on, the stronger the influence of the stories. What if one day, the person called Kim Dokja was resurrected after 3 days and shouted the following words? I am Kim Dokja. I received the blessing of Christ. It didn't matter if Christ was replaced by Dionysus, Mitra, or someone else. People would be amazed and a myth would be reproduced on the spot. The amazed incarnations would spread the story and the power of the story would exceed imagination. As a result, the nebula related to the story would have more power to intervene in the probability. In other words, the nebula were in a frenzy because of this. I had the power to control the scenarios. The constellations of the Korean peninsula are paying attention to your choice. Chapter 147. Constellation Banquet. Part 2. According to my choice, the fate of the nebulae would be reversed on the Korean peninsula. At first glance, it looked like a situation where I was in an advantageous position, but I wasn't that comfortable. The constellations are quarreling over the legitimacy of the myths. I seemed to have the option of choosing, but the problem was after the selection. The nebulae were sensitive about plagiarism when it came to the resurrection story. In particular, the confrontation between Eden and Vedas was severe. If I chose one side, then the other side would completely turn their back to me. I was only a bud who hadn't become a constellation yet. If I refused all of them, they would feel resentment towards me. Many constellations want you to choose quickly. Damn. I was afraid of receiving criticism over the resurrection and of becoming a public enemy among the constellations. What should I do? The constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring, is mediating the conflict between the constellations. The constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring, emphasizes that it is the incarnation's choice. Persephone was on my side. By the way, why was she helping me? Some constellations are dissatisfied with the intervention of Queen of the Darkest Spring. Some constellations are asking for a solution from Queen of the Darkest Spring. The constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring, recommends that the incarnation, Kim Dokja, be invited to the constellation banquet. Banquet? After a while, the nebula Eden agrees with the suggestion from Queen of the Darkest Spring. The nebula Vedas agrees with the suggestion from Queen of the Darkest Spring. A number of constellations agree with the suggestion from Queen of the Darkest Spring. Regardless of my intention, I felt like my existence was being sold at a low price. I somehow felt empty, and then the Dakibi Yunki appeared in front of me. Pant, pant. Sir Dokja. Perhaps he came in a hurry. Yunki was covered in sweat. There is a place you have to go. Where? I will help you get there. I'll prepare it right away. I had a rough idea of where I was going. Based on how nervous Yunki was, the pressure from the constellations must be considerable. Eh? It felt like my body was collapsing and being reborn. It wasn't resurrection. It was closer to the soul forming a body. It was a state like a floating ghost, but it was temporary. This is an important meeting. A shirt and suit covered the soul body that didn't have any genitalia. The texture of the cloth felt like it had been created for me. Stories are shining in the distant night sky. The constellation banquet is currently being held. The constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring, has invited you to the constellation banquet. The constellation banquet. Along with sponsor selection, it was an event arranged for the constellations of the star stream. I was invited to a banquet where only constellations were invited, despite not yet being a constellation. I looked at the time remaining until I was resurrected. Time remaining, 23 hours, 54 minutes and 12 seconds. 23 hours. It was enough time for a short visit. It was a bit fast, but the place I had to go was obvious. Okay, let's go. It was finally time to visit the constellations. The person who invited you will soon send an envoy. Understood. I wish you a successful debut. Yunki raised a fist with resolute eyes and soon disappeared from in front of me. I looked around and the area was covered with white clouds. I realized that this was one of the tributaries of the Cloud Road. Numerous dakibis moved along this road to get to other dimensions. You have temporarily left the main scenario area. You must return to the scenario area within 24 hours, Earth time. If you don't return in time, you will be disposed of according to the scenario rules. Disposal. The system was really frightening, just like last time when I went to the underworld. The hidden scenario, Constellation Banquet will begin. Plus. Hidden scenario, Constellation Banquet, category, hidden. Difficulty? Clear conditions, participate in the banquet and have a successful debut. Time limit, 24 hours. Compensation, 100,000 coins, favor or dislike from some of the constellations. Failure. Plus. At any rate, there are many scenarios hidden in the star stream. As long as I maintained my heart, I would get more coins than I thought. I saw 4 horses flying in from a distance. The white horses were like a light source as they emitted a white light. They flew with golden wings and behind them was a golden carriage. There was the symbol of the sun engraved on the outside of the carriage. I recognized the carriage with one glance. Surely this wasn't the sun carriage? Then the presence in the carriage. Hey, get in. I was amazed by the true voice that I heard. It showed that the presence in the carriage wasn't someone huge. Hey, it's okay. This is a symbolic realm, so my true voice is weaker. Get in quickly. I won't eat you. I nervously got into the carriage. If this was really the sun carriage, the owner of this carriage would probably be the sun god Helios, eh? You are. I looked at the occupant of the carriage with wide eyes. To be precise, it wasn't an occupant. Only a wine glass filled with delicious red wine floated inside the carriage. I wondered about the situation and then the wine glass opened its mouth. Don't you recognize me? The constellation god of wine and ecstasy is disappointed in you. I asked in a startled manner, Dionysus? There was a dazzling spark and the wine glass screamed. Hey, don't call my name so carelessly. I feel good because I'm excited. Why do you look like this? It is due to the probability. This is a good form to save on probability costs. You know, the Great Star Stream is quite strict. In fact, from my point of view, it was better than his true building. No matter how much I had the fourth wall, there was no certainty that I would be in a good state if I saw the body of the constellation. The carriage set off as soon as I sat down. I didn't know why Dionysus was driving Helios' sun carriage, but he seemed to have a reason. Is this the first time you've actually seen me? Nice to meet you, I am the god of wine and ecstasy. My name is famous in your country. I'm also pleased to meet you. We awkwardly greeted each other and sat in a corner of the carriage. Unlike his usual playfulness, Dionysus didn't say much. Did he have a shy personality? It was unexpected. Well, not all stories were true. The wine in the glass shook in a worrisome manner every time the carriage jolted. Would it fly in my direction? The liquid seemed to be a symbol of something, and I wondered what it represented for Dionysus. After a while of idle thoughts, Dionysus said, "Ah, I'm sorry. I was chatting with a goddess I know for a second. It seems you are very busy?" "It isn't like that. I should proactively manage the girls these days." I didn't know if it was a joke or not. "By the way, you are calmer than I expected?" "I am still a famous constellation." "It isn't the first time I've seen a constellation." "Ah, that reminds me. Was it last time when I sent you to the underworld?" "Yes, thank you for that." "What thanks? What did you do in the underworld?" "Huh? I have never seen the queen act so kindly." "Trying to protect one incarnation from the nebulae, huh? Perhaps?" "What that it? You told that old lady." His voice was somewhat envious. Dionysus didn't seem to know that I completed Persephone's task. Nothing happened. Hey, don't be shy. Isn't that anti-sexy? If I wasn't a gentleman on the outside, do you have to say it that way? Isn't the queen of the underworld your mother? Haha. There is that theory. Is it fake? I didn't say that. Why are you looking at me like that? Don't you know Olympus? This taboo is nothing. Come to think of it, Olympus was such a place. A paradise of gods who thought with their lower half. Still, this was too nasty. Ah, yes. Speaking of which, did you get my previous message? Stick to my side. I particularly want to give you the story of Bacchus. Why is your expression like that? No need. I hurriedly shook my head. Dionysus was one of the 12 high-ranking constellations of Olympus. But the story of Bacchus. Aha, I get it. Look at this person. Are you comparing it with the stories from Eden or Vedas? No, that's not it. Hey, it is because you don't know anything. Do you know what will happen if you receive the story of the resurrected Messiah? You will have to live compassionately your whole life. It is the same after you die. Yes? You will have to live like a priest god. Dionysus shouted loudly. Huh? Do you know how great the Bacchus story is in contrast? Don't you know my goddesses? The goddesses who ripped apart homosexuals? Dionysus jumped with surprise. Why yes. You can spend frenzied days and nights with them. I can give you an endless refill of wine. Have you heard of the Olympus orgies? Do you know Aphrodite? If you want, I will invite her. The constellation goddess of love and beauty is looking at the god of wine and ecstasy. Let's just pretend I didn't say that. What do you think? It doesn't appeal to me. The Dionysus wine shook uneasily. That reminds me, an angel of Eden says that you are interested in sodomy. I think I know who spread it, but ignore that girl. I want to know the real reason why you came to see me. What are you talking about? It is to get you to join our nebula. Is that really all it is? Dionysus was silent for a moment. The wine glass was still for a while, before making a circle in the air. You noticed quickly. I've heard a lot. Do you want a drink? Drink some of my wine. I don't really like drinking. Well, okay. You're right. In fact, my purpose isn't to take you to Olympus. It was as I thought. He was a god, meaning nothing he said was sincere. It was strange that despite all the nebulae paying attention to me, one of Olympus' 12 constellations came to pick up one incarnation. Yet Dionysus' next words completely broke my expectations. I'll tell you directly. I hope you don't join Olympus. Huh? To be more precise. Then a terrible explosion occurred. The sun carriage shook like it had been hit by something, and the horses screamed. I turned back and saw wine pouring from Dionysus' glass. "Ah, fuck." I was so surprised I pissed. I was afraid to ask what his urine was. I carefully avoided the spilled wine. "Damn, it looks like other nebulae are looking for you." I looked out the curtain and saw creatures with terrifying presences flying all over the place. They were still far away, and I didn't know what nebulae they belonged to, but it was clear they didn't like me. Fuck. I paid a lot to borrow this from Helios, this won't work. Get off here and run the rest of the way. It is just a short run along the cloud road. Here? Wasn't it air? I will stop them. Go quickly. If you enter the banquet hall, no nebulae can touch you. The curtains opened at his words. I looked at the clouds below and gulped. I was a soul. This meant I wouldn't die if I fell. Then Dionysus' voice was heard behind me. Keep this in mind. Don't trust anyone. I leapt out of the carriage as Dionysus laughed. See you again, Incarnation Kim Dokja. I jumped off the carriage onto the road. There was a huge sound behind me, and then a brutal oppression pushed on my body. It was a tremendous force I had never felt before. At least part of the true essence had descended. Sparks struck like a thunderstorm. I could tell without looking back. The confrontation between constellation and constellation had begun. I rushed with all my strength along the cloud road. Debris flew over my head and I felt the ground cracking. I never looked back. How much time had passed? Finally, a huge castle was seen and the noise behind me weakened. I had reached the entrance of the castle. I came to participate in the banquet. The gatekeeper looked down at me. He seemed to be a low-grade Dakibi, dispatched from the bureau. What? I didn't hear about an incarnation coming here alone. Damn it, perhaps it was a mistake to get out of the sun carriage. Maybe that would have been my free pass. At this moment, the inner castle door opened and an unexpected savior appeared. Let him in. He is part of my group. It wasn't Persephone. The constellation I had wanted to see for a long time was waiting for me. Chapter 148. Constellation Banquet. Part 3. He stood at the entrance of the banquet hall. If I was right, he was one of the high-level constellations who supported me since the beginning of the scenarios. There was a mischievous look on the face, covered with white gold hair. One of the most powerful authorities who was imprisoned in the smallest prison of the world. I was unable to breathe as soon as I encountered the noble self and piercing eyes. This was the description from Ways of Survival. I watched in a spellbound manner. This was a top presence located at the top of Ways of Survival. I ignored the housekeeper and ran inside. The great sage, the equal of heaven. However, the laughing great sage, the equal of heaven, disappeared in front of my eyes. He was like smoke. It was as if he was telling me I wasn't qualified to meet him yet. A clone? My hand fell in a dejected manner, but the situation wasn't over. I suddenly called out the name of the great sage, the equal of heaven, making the constellations on the first floor of the banquet hall pay attention to me. Who is that person? An incarnation called the nickname of a particular constellation. Most of the constellation didn't have great expressions. Gazes focused on me from all over the banquet hall. An incarnation? What? Who is that incarnation? Countless gazes gathered, the atmosphere was heating up and I was so stiff that I couldn't move. My mind became blank and I couldn't tell who was looking at me. I thought I could hold on after hearing the constellation's true voices. However, it was clearly the influence of Fourth Wall. Just their gazes made me like this. Now I realized. I was the only existence in this banquet hall who wasn't a constellation. I finally stood before the constellations. Now, please calm down. There was a mistake, so I will be taking this friend for a bit. I heard a familiar voice, and somebody lifted my stiff body and moved it somewhere. As I left the banquet hall and entered the banquet, the hell was over and I barely managed to breathe. Why would you come here alone? I turned and saw a familiar figure floating in the air. Bai Hyung? Yes, it's me. The Queen of Night said she would send an envoy. Didn't they come with you? Why are you wandering around alone in this place? Do you want to go to hell? There were circumstances. Hey, is that the problem now? This isn't the scenario area. If you make a mistake, then it is the end. This place. It is a place where there are people who can kill humans with their eyes like we are bugs. I know. I understood. That's why I came here. Bai Hyung pouted like he wasn't satisfied and took me somewhere. I'll take you to the waiting room. Rest there for a while. There is a screen in the waiting room that you can watch. Be sure to take a look. Do you understand? There must be something based on the way Bai Hyung was acting. Not long afterwards, we arrived at the waiting room. By the way, the sign in front of the waiting room was very strange. Incarnation waiting room? There was something like this? Do you think you are the only incarnation? Of course, you are the only one who came here alone. The door opened and I saw an unexpected figure. He spoke first. Kim Dokja? I looked at him with a blank expression and waved awkwardly. Yu Jong-hyuk. The constellation banquet was frequently mentioned in Ways of Survival. It was the place Yu Jong-hyuk usually came to whenever he used regression. It was natural for Yu Jong-hyuk to be included on the invitation list. I didn't know who was invited this time, but this person would try to form a relationship with the narrative grade constellations. The Constellation Banquet was a joint event with several countries. There was the Seoul Dome, Washington Dome, Moscow Dome and New Delhi Dome. Perhaps the Bureau had held a performance presentation to select the best performing domes. Once I saw the list of participating countries, it was similar to Yu Jong-hyuk's 24th regression. There were separate incarnations for each country in the waiting room. Yu Jong-hyuk asked me, "Why are you here?" Probably a similar reason to you. When will you revive? Maybe tomorrow. The others are worried. I'm sorry. I felt somewhat uneasy as I had a conversation with Yu Jong-hyuk. His fists were clenched tightly like he was angry. I suspected that he might have anger control issues these days. I sat in the chair next to Yu Jong-hyuk and watched the scene playing on the large screen in front of me. There was an intermediate Dakibi promotion ad playing on the screen. Thank you to all the constellations and Dakibis who have given me the glory of the story. It was an interview with the representative of the low-grade Dakibis, Bai Hyung. That bastard, this was why he told me to watch. Half of the glory is actually due to an incarnation working hard in my channel. Maybe he is a friend that you know. I'll give half this joy to the incarnation. I felt uncomfortable at the shameless words. The surrounding incarnations were looking this way, so I turned my attention away. Then Bai Hyung took out a golden egg and raised it up to the sky. I immediately recognized what it was. The other half will be given to this child who will be born. It was the egg where the soul of Shin Yusung was sleeping. Fortunately, it seemed to be growing well. Don't tell me, did you? Yu Jong-hyuk used Sage's eyes as he looked between me and Bai Hyung's egg with a shocked expression. I spoke an excuse. It was the only way. Do you know what you did? I know. If you do this, Shin Yusung. I knew what Yu Jong-hyuk was worried about. The person who had been suffering from the story for so long was now the subject producing the tragedy. I didn't have to say that Yu Jong-hyuk knew how painful this was. I told him if she is born as a Dakibi, at least she will never die. The Bureau is the safest place until the star stream is destroyed. Of course, this wasn't the only reason. Still, I couldn't tell him all my reasons for making Shin Yusung a Dakibi. Yu Jong-hyuk's eyes met mine. It felt like he would pull out his sword and cut me to pieces right here. Perhaps, are you Kim Dokja? The voice that interrupted us caused the tense atmosphere to disappear. I turned and saw a beautiful mixed-race woman. She had wavy brown hair and gentle brown eyes. Her smile was especially beautiful. That's correct. Do you know me? Oh, a little bit. I have heard stories. It was great. I couldn't believe this woman came to talk to me first. Nice to meet you, Selena Kim. Do you know me? Aren't you the representative of the United States? I've heard it before. Of course, I didn't really hear it. I just knew her. The exclusive skill character list is activated. Only randomly specified items will be displayed for the user's convenience. Plus. Character list summary, character, Selena Kim. Private attribute, animal lover, rare, king's guardian, hero, constellation sponsor, ender of wars. Plus. Selena Kim from the Washington Dome. She was a member of Anna Croft's Zarathustra and one of the strongest 100 women in Ways of Survival. The king of no killing was an attribute that originally belonged to this woman. Unfortunately, she had acquired another attribute because I took it first. I asked, Anna Croft didn't come? You know Anna? I've met her in a dream the other day. She wanted to come. If she knew you were coming, she would have come. Of course, then the situation would become more complicated. Tell that girl to take good care of her neck. You are the same as Anna told me, Yoo Jong-hyuk. The reason Anna didn't come here was due to Yoo Jong-hyuk. In the last regression, Yoo Jong-hyuk was betrayed by Anna Croft. Anna would have seen what she did to Yoo Jong-hyuk. Thus, it was natural that she didn't come here. There is a very ugly person on the Korean side. Are you the representative of South Korea? I looked back and saw that it was Russia's representative who spoke this time. Iris, that's rude. It is a bad habit to evaluate others based on appearance. I said he is ugly because he is ugly. Honesty is a virtue in Moscow. White blonde hair with pure white skin. The little girl had her hair up in twin ponytails. I knew who had come from Moscow. However, I pretended not to know. This girl was one of the people I hated in Ways of Survival. I deliberately asked her, who are you? Don't you know? You don't know me, Iris Vladimirovna Rebezova? Should I know you? Selena Kim intervened. Dr. SSI, I will introduce you. This is Iris. She is a representative from Russia. In Russia, she is called the full-body red square. Ahem, that is me. I nodded. I wanted to say something about the ostentatious nickname, but I stopped because it would cause trouble. Selena Kim continued speaking, Iris, this is Kim Dokja. He is from South Korea and his nickname. I am sorry, I don't know Dokja SSI's nickname. Then Yoo Jong-hyuk opened his mouth. This nickname is, I hurriedly interrupted. I don't have a nickname yet. A ridiculing laugh emerged from Iris' mouth. A person came here without a nickname? I had one, but it was disgusting. I don't know why you are qualified to be here, but you better be good. As the Russia representative showed a fighting spirit, Yoo Jong-hyuk moved forward. Perhaps she felt the huge strength of Yoo Jong-hyuk. Iris took a half step back. Don't interfere. This is better me, and that ugly guy. Despite Iris' warning, Yoo Jong-hyuk kept staring at her. Well done. If you want to slap someone, then do it to Yoo Jong-hyuk. In the end, Iris bit her lips and retreated. Well, I don't know what trivial upper-grade constellation brought you here to take their story, but, let's just leave it. Take the story of a upper-grade constellation? This girl was somewhat cute. That reminded me, there was something about the story succession at the constellation banquet. Perhaps this was what Iris was alluding to. Knock knock. The door of the waiting room opened and a low-grade Dakibi appeared. Incarnations. We will be holding this story succession soon. A place has been temporarily set up on the first floor of the banquet hall. For reference, the first floor is only for the upper-grade constellations. Story succession. It wasn't only through sponsor selection that the constellations could influence the incarnations. Despite not being their sponsor, an incarnation could build up strength by inheriting the story of other constellations and showing examples of the story. By widely announcing the story, the constellations broadened their power. This was good for both incarnation and constellation. We walked to the banquet hall one by one. The first one to enter was Selena Kim. Selena Kim. King's Guardian. I've been watching your good performance. Unlike before, the reaction of the constellations were favorable. Maybe it was because they met their favorite incarnations. It was like meeting their favorite celebrity. Then it was Iris' turn. She walked past the constellations and waved lightly like she was giving them fan service. Iris. The red square kid. Ha ha ha. Cute. Isn't it exactly the same as what I saw on the screen? She stood in her place and stared at me. She seemed to be saying to me, "Did you see?" So what? It was soon my turn. I walked into the banquet hall and the pressure of the gazes poured towards me again. This time, I could endure it. Maybe because I had experienced it once before, or because the gazes contained a different feeling. However, the reaction of the constellations was strange. The heated atmosphere was quiet, as if cold water had been poured on it. Perhaps I wasn't popular? Iris seemed to be laughing at me. Then someone opened his mouth. That person. He is Kim Dokja of the Korean Peninsula. Kim Dokja? That Kim Dokja? The chatter started again. It was a completely different reaction from the previous incarnations. Kim Dokja. That guy is Kim Dokja. Kim Dojega. Kim Dojega. The king of a kingless world. The voices of the constellations rose every time I took a step. He who opposes the enemy. It was like a wildfire spread throughout the hall as the voices continued. Hey, do you remember me? The bald general of justice. Kim Dokja. I'm King Hunma the Great. I silently walked through the middle of the banquet hall. I saw Peaceland very well. Child, can you say something? Hey. Wave your hand over here. I sponsored you 3,000 coins. You came. Kim Dokja. Isn't he better than what we watched? The whole banquet hall seemed to be a vast melting pot as the constellations forgot their dignity. Their souls seemed to be ripening, so I was forced to raise my hand towards them and waved. Then chaos exploded among the constellations. Handsome Kim Dokja. Iris was looking this way with a dismayed expression. However, I didn't see her. I didn't come here to play. The scenario footage was covering the ceiling and walls. Incarnations were screaming and dying while the constellations laughed as they watched. I saw this and once again realized what this place was. It was where all human tragedies became dinner. I looked up at the second floor of the banquet hall. Unlike the ridiculous first-floor constellations, an ominous silence came from the constellations on the second floor. They were constellations who each shone with a fearsome presence. They were the real enemies I had to fight,